A Valjoux powered Tissot chronograph from the 70s, all for under 500 bucks. Up next. What's up, guys? It is Chris back with another watch video. Today we are taking a look at a Tissot Seastar 1970s chronograph. And as you can see, this looks like a 1970s chronograph. It has the case and dial that just screams 1970s. This is a silver dial version. It has some red accents on the chronograph and seconds hand, some blue accents on that 30-minute counter at 3 o'clock. We have a 60 seconds counter at 3 o'clock. Of course, sweep second hand because we have a hand wound Valjoux 7734 inside. This is a 40 millimeter chronograph. It's actually very nicely sized, wears very, very well. I have this on an aftermarket Vario strap in tweed. Just a very interesting 1970s chronograph. And the reason why this is part of my affordable vintage series that I'm doing is because this is actually a very, very affordable watch. And we will come back to price. 40 millimeters across, very, very nicely sized. Silver dial, applied indices. We have a date window at 6 o'clock. Bi-compact, so we have a seconds counter at the 3 o'clock, at the 9 o'clock, and at the 3 o'clock we have a minutes counter. The chronograph on this is very nice. Very solid function, and for a watch that is pretty old, functions really well and flies back, lines up with the 12 o'clock indice almost perfectly, but not entirely perfectly. And that's to be expected on these old vintage chronographs. Again, like I said, this is from the Seastar lineup. So technically these are not really divers. You don't have a screwed in crown, you do have a screwed in case back. I would never go diving with this. It's a vintage watch. So just something that you would definitely keep in your collection and your vintage collection essentially. Polished sides. This I don't believe has been polished or refinished. It's actually in really good condition. The bezel on these are an issue. So this is a plastic bezel. This would have had a tachometer on it and it would have been finished in some sort of metal finishing. However, when you see these in the wild and on eBay or in vintage collections or in vintage watch shops, usually the bezels look like this. If you see one with a intact bezel, that is very rare and they would call for more money, I would believe. However, a lot of people actually replace these bezels with bezels from Seiko from the same era and other watches that would actually fit this. I believe it's like a 38 millimeter bezel, so you could, or 33 millimeter bezel, somewhere around there. And you could definitely replace them, but I left it as is because I really don't care. I think it looks pretty cool with this black bezel. It actually would have been stepped. It would have been squared off, but this has been worn down so much that it's actually rounded. It's not from wear and tear. I don't think they were very, very well made bezels, and I think that's the reason why that happens. Or people may have just peeled off the metal because it started looking bad and they decided to go with the all black look. This has a boxed acrylic crystal. This has been polished, so it looks really good. Definitely not the norm for a lot of these, but very easy to clean up if you have one. This probably does not have the original pushers or the original crown. The original crown would have been signed. This is not, so this is probably a replacement crown. And then we have a very plain screwed in case back. Cushion case, like I mentioned, 40 millimeters, so these wear actually very, very good, and I'll quickly put it on my wrist. Before I do, I am wearing my vintage Mark II Speedmaster, and on this watch I have a clear case back, so you can actually see the movement, but it's and there it is. And I'll actually unscrew the case back on my Tissot so you can see the movement as well. But you can see these were 42 millimeters, I believe, and this is a 40 millimeter chronograph. You can see they're pretty closely sized. The Omega is slightly bigger, but these wear a little bit smaller than the Omega. They fit really well, and I'll throw it on my wrist so you can see. I have a 7.5-inch wrist for your reference, and just throwing this on. I have this on an aftermarket tweed strap from Harris, from Valjoux. This is a Harris tweed strap. And the reason why I put it on odd straps like this, and this is a really cool strap actually, the reason why I put it on a strap like this is because Tissot are really annoying, and they put 21 millimeter lug widths on a lot of their watches. If you buy a Tissot Seastar 1000 right now, it has a 21 millimeter lug width. Why they do that is beyond me. It makes it really hard to find aftermarket straps. Aftermarket bracelets are impossible. I was looking, and I have been looking for an original bracelet for this watch, and it's really hard to find, but I think it looks really good on this strap, actually. Really excellent. And I'll do a strap change. It also looks really good on a NATO strap. If you're interested in NATO straps, this watch looks really good on a NATO strap. It really fits the bill. These are excellent chronographs. If you're looking for a very colorful, very 70s chronograph, and obviously I believe these dated back to the early 70s, and these have applied indices, really a lot of color on the dial, black and red. This in general are hard to find with a really good dial like this. However, in this condition, you can find these watches for around $500. You can find them for a little less depending on the condition. With a bracelet, and anything that has the bezel intact will be more expensive. If it has an original bracelet, it's going to be, you know, $100 or $200 more, especially if it has that bezel. And usually, like I said, a majority of them do not have a bezel that's intact. And if it does have a bezel that's semi-intact, it's very heavily worn. And that's just unfortunate, just the way the build quality of these bezels were. Other than that, there's really no other issues with build quality on these watches. They are very well made, and like I said, really nicely put together. There is lume actually on this watch, and I will do a lume shot. However, the lume isn't fantastic. It's very old. Even if this was serviced, and I believe, like I said, it was. I don't know if it was polished, but I know that it was serviced because of the crown, and the pushers have been replaced. The pushers are period correct. The crown is not signed. However, the lume could have been relumed. Either way, the lume on this watch isn't very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a strap change, then I'm going to show you the movement, and then we'll do a quick lume shot. So here it is on a NATO strap. I use this military green NATO strap on a lot of my watches. I really like the color green, and I think this looks really good with this watch. I think this looks good on a lot of watches. I've actually used this on my my Omega, and I also have a Bulova that I've used this on. This fits actually pretty well because this is an oddly shaped or fitted strap, so there's a little bit of space. You could see if I don't know if you could see that, but there's a little bit of space when I move it. So anyway, the next thing I will show you, it will be the movement. And here is the Valjoux 7734 manual line caliber inside this Tissot Seastar. Just a really good looking movement. These are highly underrated movements, I think. A lot of people do love them, and I really like them a lot, and I think they look really good. On these watches, it's a shame that you can't see the movement because they are so nice. Anyway, this is a great value. I really think this watch is an excellent value for anybody who is looking for a vintage chronograph. There are tons of vintage chronographs out there that are going for astronomical amounts of money. This is a vintage chronograph from a very major brand, a brand that still makes watches today. They used to make watches that were of an even higher caliber, and today they're making really good watches. And this is just a piece of their history. It's a really cool watch. You know, nothing that is going to break your bank, and something that's actually still to this day pretty easy to service. These Valjoux 7734s aren't bad. They work really well. They're very reliable, just like a Valjoux movement is today. So as long as you have a watch that is working and is working well, If you're not beating on it and wearing it every day, you'll be fine. And this is a very good example of that watch. So mine tells very, very good time. It's not extremely accurate. I think it's about, I've done 1 or 2 tests on this watch, and I was in the high teens that it was fast, just a few seconds a day. Maybe I think it was around 15 or 16 seconds a day to 18 seconds a day, which for a watch that is literally almost 50 years old, that's not terrible. And it's pretty good. So what I'll do is I'll put the case back on again, and I will do a quick lume shot so you guys can see what the lume is on this. Don't be too surprised if it is not that bright, because it is not. But again, very cool watch, very cool movement, very 70s. And if you're looking for a watch that is inexpensive and you want to start something, vintage collection, something that's reliable, these Tissot Seastars are very, very reliable, and they're very good looking and very sizable watches that wear pretty well in the modern era. So quick lume shot. All right, well, there you go. It is not incredibly bright. As I mentioned, you could see my Omega right here. This actually has I believe, new hands on it. So the lume on the hands of my Omega are new. When I recently did a service. However, the dial is not. So you can see the lume doesn't last at all on my Omega. So it's pretty much very similar to what's on this Tissot. It just lasts for a few seconds and then it's gone. The hands are lumed, and then the dial are lumed on the Tissot. It looks good. Just for a few seconds, and then it fades pretty quickly. The lume on the hands for the Omega do hang on. Omega, not famous for their lume either way, but this is pretty apparent that it's obviously some of the original lume on here. Anyway, like I said, really excellent chronographs. You can get one in this condition for under $500. They look great on different straps, and if you can get one with a bracelet, even better, and then you could switch it out for a strap that you like. But I would not spend more than $500 on these watches. Get one that's working, one that you don't really need one that's been recently serviced. As long as it's in working condition and it's telling time, these watches are pretty reliable and really, really fun watches, especially with the blue and the red accents. They look great. And the only thing is that bezel is very, very hard to find one with a bezel that is intact. Again, if you find one with a bracelet with a bezel that's intact, you're going to be spending a lot more money than $500. And for me, I didn't think it was worth it. I enjoy the watch as it is, but that is just me. Anyway, if you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. It is super helpful for the channel and much appreciated. And thank you for logging on. I will see you in the next video.